In 2002, a retired psychiatrist vanished from her Savannah home. The only thing she left behind. A single, chilling note. He still knows what happened in room 4. 22 years later, her estranged son finds a locked box in her attic, and inside are patient transcripts, undeveloped Polaroids, and something far more disturbing. What Dr. Mira Rowley uncovered was never meant to see the light of day. Subscribe for more cinematic true crime mysteries every day. August 12, 2002. Dr. Mira Rowley is last seen watering her garden. That evening, her neighbor hears the front door slam and a sharp cry. But when police search the home days later, they find no signs of forced entry. The only oddity? Mira's prescription pad on the kitchen counter with one cryptic line in shaky handwriting. He still knows what happened in room 4. March 12, 2024. Location, Savannah, Georgia. The house on East Taylor Street looked smaller than Gavin remembered. Or maybe it just felt that way, shrinking under the weight of silence and salt-thick air. The white clapboard siding had yellowed in the corners. One shutter hung loose. Ivy coiled like veins around the rusted wrought iron railing. It had been 22 years since his mother, Dr. Mira Rowley, vanished from this house. And for all that time, it had sat still, frozen under a court order. Untouched but not untouched. Now it belonged to him. Gavin stood on the porch holding the probate key in his palm, not ready to turn it. Behind him, the March breeze swept in from the coast, carrying the smell of distant rain and magnolia bloom. He exhaled and inserted the key into the tarnished brass lock. It turned with a click loud enough to feel like a gunshot in his chest. Inside, the air was stale and warm. The foyer was exactly how he remembered it. Polished oak floors covered in plastic runners, the antique umbrella stand, the portrait of Mira's medical school graduating class hung straight as ever. A layer of dust coated everything like ash. It smelled of paper, cedar, and time. He stepped through carefully, like someone trespassing inside their own memory. She had been meticulous in life. That much hadn't changed, even after retirement, even after the hospital closed, even after his father died. Meera had always kept things in place, so it struck him as strange, almost wrong, when he found the attic door unlocked. Gavin hadn't planned to go up there first. He was supposed to start downstairs, sorting books, filing her medical estate, calling the storage company. But something pulled him up those narrow stairs with the flaking white paint and the rail he remembered gripping tightly as a kid whenever she scolded him. The attic hatch creaked open. It smelled like dust and insulation. The light bulb flickered twice before holding. Shadows shifted over stacks of boxes labeled tax returns, journals, patient files, old, and Christmas. And then he saw the metal box. It was tucked behind an old trunk, half covered by a blanket that looked decades old, about the size of a microwave. Heavy, locked with a small combination dial. No label. Just a faded post-it note on top, handwritten in his mother's precise script. If you find this, be careful what you remember. Gavin sat cross-legged on the attic floor, knees aching, trying different combinations. Birthdays, graduation years, her license number. Nothing worked. He stood to stretch, annoyed, and accidentally knocked over the trunk beside it. Papers spilled out, old newspaper clippings and photographs. One fell face up. It was a Polaroid. A child sat in a padded chair wearing a paper gown. The face was turned slightly away, but Gavin's stomach dropped. The boy looked familiar. The shape of the ears, the curve of the neck. His hands trembled as he turned over the photo. On the back, in thick black marker, Room 4, Session 3. Gabriel K. Gabriel? The name tickled something buried in his skull. His breathing quickened. Back to the box. He stared at the lock again. Room 4. That had been on the prescription pad, the note his mother left before she vanished. He still knows what happened in room 4. He spun the dial. 404. The latch clicked open. Inside, he found a bundle of cassette tapes labeled only by patient initials and numbers. A thick folder titled St. Augustine Closure Records, Confidential. Several more Polaroids, most showing children in sterile rooms. A black leather-bound notebook, aged at the edges. He opened the folder first. On the first page was a copy of the hospital's closure memo. St. Augustine Children's Psychiatric Center, closure, effective. March 1989. All patients transferred or discharged. Lead administrator, Dr. Thurston Vale. Wing D sealed after incident in room 4. See attachment, incident report number 14. But there was no attachment. He reached for the notebook. The first entry was dated 2001. Patient 004, Gabriel K., showed signs of resurfaced memory during induced recall. I fear what this confirms. They never transferred those children. They hid them. Gavin felt his pulse in his throat. What was this? A creak from the stairs made him freeze. He waited, holding his breath. Nothing. Old houses made noise. He knew that. Still, he gently closed the box, secured the notebook under his arm, and descended the attic stairs with the caution of someone leaving a crime scene. In the study, Gavin set the recorder on her desk. It was a classic portable cassette player. Meera had used one like it when he was a kid. She'd record her case notes, grocery lists, lectures. He picked one tape at random. Session 6, Naomi T. He pressed play. A soft hiss. Then his mother's voice, clinical, composed. Session 6 with Naomi T., age 9. Patient presents recurring night terrors centered on room 4. Claims she sees a tall man in her dreams, speaks in rhyme, and wears a white coat. Then a small girl's voice. He said I had to stay quiet, that it was our secret. If I talked, he'd come for my eyes. A pause. Shuffling papers. Naomi. Who is he? A whisper. The one in the mirror. He watches from the glass. Gavin stopped the tape. His hands were shaking. This wasn't just an old patient case. It wasn't just therapy. His mother had been chasing something, and whatever she found might be the reason she disappeared. March 13th, 2024. Location: Savannah, Georgia. The morning light made the house feel less haunted, but not less strange. Gavin sat in his mother's old study, surrounded by evidence he didn't know what to do with. A ceramic mug from Emory Medical School sat beside a cassette tape labeled Patient 004, Gabriel K. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. The words on Naomi's recording still rang in his head. He said I had to stay quiet, or he'd come for my eyes. He flipped open the transcript binder he'd found in the metal box. On the inside cover, Meera had glued a typed note. St. Augustine Psychiatric. Unofficial notes. These were never meant to be preserved. But truth has a way of surviving its burial. The binder was thick, each page yellowed at the edges, printed in Meera's careful, double-spaced format, typed with a clinical rhythm. Names were redacted, patients reduced to initials. He turned to Session 1. Patient 004, Gabriel K. The date was October 14th, 1987, just 6 days before the patient riot that led to the hospital's shutdown. Transcript. Session 1. Patient 004, Gabriel K., age 11. Therapist, Dr. Mira Rowley. Setting Office C12, St. Augustine Psychiatric, Dr. Rowley. Hello, Gabriel. Thank you for coming in today. Gabriel. Can I draw instead? Dr. Rowley. Of course, but while you draw, I want to ask you a few questions. Gabriel. You're not like him. Your voice is soft. Dr. Rowley. Who do you mean by him? Gabriel. Inaudible scribbling noises. The man in room 4. He talks through the walls. Dr. Rowley. Gabriel. Room 4 isn't occupied right now. It's been sealed for months. No one is there. Gabriel, he never left. Dr. Rowley, you said something last time about the mirror. Does it have to do with room 4? Gabriel, he lives behind it. If you say his name in the dark, he comes out, but only if you're alone. Dr. Rowley, and did you ever say his name? Gabriel, voice trembling, once, when the nurses locked me in there overnight for punishment. Dr. Rowley, what happened? Gabriel, he showed me his face. Dr. Rowley, can you describe him? Gabriel, no eyes, just holes, and a smile that never moves. His hands were wet, not like water, like blood that's been washed but never gone. Dr. Rowley, silence noted, 12 seconds. Gabriel, I want to help you, but I need you to be honest with me. Was someone hurting you in room 4? Gabriel, yes, but not just me. Dr. Rowley, who else? Gabriel, the other kids, the quiet ones, the ones nobody asked about. Dr. Rowley, do you remember their names? Gabriel, only the ones who screamed. End transcript. Gavin closed the binder and sat back. The words felt radioactive, too dangerous to hold in his hands. If this was real, if his mother had documented this in 1987, why hadn't anyone done anything? Why weren't these tapes and transcripts in the hands of police? He stared across the room at a bookshelf lined with academic journals, then at the photo of his mother on the desk. White coat, stethoscope, steely gaze. Why had she kept this hidden? He stood, needing air. The hallway creaked beneath his feet. He hadn't explored upstairs since he arrived. Mira's bedroom door was cracked open. Inside, the bed was perfectly made. On the nightstand, a copy of The Body Keeps the Score, a bottle of unopened prescription sleep aids, and a lamp that hadn't been turned on in years. He found himself opening her closet without knowing why. Behind her, neatly hung cardigans and pressed suits. Something crinkled. Gavin reached in and pulled out a manila envelope, stuffed thick with photocopies of medical records. Each was stamped, St. Augustine Children's Psychiatric Center transfer pending, dated March 28, 1989. He skimmed them. 6 names, 6 case numbers. All children between the ages of 7 and 13, each listed as to be relocated after the hospital's closure. And yet, scrawled in Mira's handwriting across all 6, never arrived. No follow-up, no discharge, no family contact. Gavin swallowed hard. Something had happened to them. Something in room 4. He returned to the study, opened her notebook again. One entry, dated just months before her disappearance, sent chills through him. March 5, 2002. He's still in Savannah. I saw him at the pharmacy on Bull Street. Older now, slower, but unmistakable. Thurston Vale. I thought he was dead. I hoped. But he's hiding in plain sight, under a different name. I think he knows I've found the transcripts, the Gabriel recordings. I have to act carefully. If I disappear, Gavin, if you're reading this, you must go to room 4. That's where the real story begins. Room 4. He opened his laptop and searched for anything. St. Augustine Psychiatric Center, room 4, Gabriel K., Thurston Vale. The hospital had officially closed in 1989. The site had been demolished in 1993, replaced by a public works facility. Nothing about Wing D, nothing about children never discharged. But there was one hit. An obituary from 1990 for a boy named Gabriel Keller, age 13. Cause of death: complications due to seizure disorder. Cremated. No photograph, no listed relatives. He froze. Gabriel K. Was that him? Was that where they buried the truth? As Gavin sat in the growing dark, the tape player beside him hissed with static. He hadn't touched it. The rewind button clicked on its own. The tape began to play again. Gabriel's voice, soft and trembling. He said if I told, I'd forget again. that he'd put the pieces back in the wrong order. The hairs on Gavin's arms rose. He looked toward the stairwell. Somewhere, under layers of dust and years of silence, his mother had buried a secret she never stopped trying to expose. Now, it was his. March 14th, 2024. Location: Savannah, Georgia. The Public Records Office smelled like glue and mildew. Gavin stood beneath the humming fluorescence of the basement archive, leafing through brittle microfiche printouts with gloved fingers. Behind the counter, an older clerk named Deborah had watched him with suspicion until he explained he was researching the St. Augustine Children's Psychiatric Center for a documentary project. That seemed to soften her. Now he was sitting alone in a chilled reading room, eyes flickering between grainy pages projected onto the small screen. Every few clicks of the dial, something new emerged. News clippings, hospital reports, maintenance orders, death notices. The deeper he went, the less sense it all made. St. Augustine Children's Psychiatric Center opened in 1964, a repurposed antebellum estate on the outskirts of Savannah, intended for long-term psychological rehabilitation of severely traumatized children. The hospital had operated quietly for nearly 25 years. In October 1987, a riot was reported in the children's wing, specifically Wing D. The paper Gavin found was dated October 21st, 1987, just 2 days after the event. Savannah Tribune. Incident at St. Augustine triggers investigation. Following a reported disturbance in Wing D of the St. Augustine facility, several patients and staff sustained injuries. The details remain sealed by the Department of Children's Welfare. Sources close to the facility claim the unrest originated in Room 4, a padded isolation cell used for violent or suicidal patients. Witnesses say the room was found in disarray, with broken mirrors and smeared writing on the walls. No staff have commented on whether a patient was inside at the time. The hospital's chief psychiatrist, Dr. Vale, issued a brief statement. The situation is under control. Safety protocols were followed. The wing is being reviewed for renovation. But according to another article from February 1989, the wing was never reopened. Then came the official closure notice: St. Augustine Center to shut down amid funding issues. The hospital would cease operations immediately. All patients were said to be transferred to out-of-state facilities. No list of destinations, no follow-up stories, and nothing about the 6 children Meera had flagged in her transcripts. Back at the desk, Gavin jotted down a timeline in his notebook. 1987, incident in Room 4. Riot. 1989, full hospital closure, vague reporting. 1990, Gabriel Keller declared dead. Cremated. 2002, Mira Rowley disappears after leaving cryptic note. 2024, metal box discovered. Recordings, transcripts, journal. Room 4 repeatedly referenced, always at the center. He rubbed his temples. What was in that room? He called the Chatham County Zoning Office to ask about demolition permits for the hospital property. The woman on the line was helpful, said the demolition was authorized in 1993, and the new public works building went up a year later. Any idea if the foundation was completely removed? Gavin asked. There was a pause. Then, well, not all of it. They kept the sub-basement, too deep to remove without damaging nearby properties. They sealed it off with concrete and left the rest buried. Sealed off? Yep, totally inaccessible. Unless someone found a way in. Gavin drove out to the old hospital site that afternoon. The public works facility looked sterile and utilitarian. Gray siding, chain-link fence, municipal trucks in the lot. Nothing remained of the original estate. No old bricks, no ivy-covered gates. Just asphalt and cinder block, but something about the back lot felt wrong. A row of trees stood oddly aligned, as if planted to hide something. Beyond them, a slope dropped off into a shaded dip in the landscape. A patch of ground was raised slightly, covered in brittle grass. He hopped the back fence and dropped into the dip. No signs, no warning. But when he kicked at the dirt, it echoed differently, hollow. He crouched and cleared away a patch of dead leaves. Beneath them, concrete, barely visible, faintly etched lines. Then he saw it, a symbol, faded and shallow, but unmistakably carved into the slab, a number 4 circled twice. Room 4. He sat there for a long moment, heart pounding, staring at the buried door. He didn't try to open it. It looked sealed, and even if it wasn't, he didn't know what might wait below. But it confirmed what Meera had written in her notes. The room is real. The room is still here. As he stood to leave, he noticed something else nearby. A broken mirror shard, half buried in the soil. The glass was cracked but gleaming in the fading light. He turned it in his hand, etched crudely on the back in something that looked like rust or dried blood. I see you still. He dropped it. Back at the house, Gavin couldn't sit still. He opened his mother's recorder and loaded the next cassette. Session 2, Gabriel K. The recording began mid-conversation. Dr. Rowley, tired. Let's talk about the walls, Gabriel. What's behind them? Gabriel, flat. The missing ones, they don't scream anymore. Dr. Rowley. Where do they go? Gabriel. He takes them to the pink room. That's where he makes the films. Gavin froze. The pink room? Dr. Rowley. What kind of films? Gabriel. The kind where no one watches with both eyes open. Dr. Rowley. Who is he? Can you say his name? Gabriel, after long pause. I used to think he was a doctor, but I don't think doctors should smile like that when they hurt people. Gavin ejected the tape, hands trembling. The walls, the mirror, the missing children. It was all connected. Meera hadn't been paranoid. She'd been onto something bigger than a failed psychiatric hospital, something buried deep, literally and figuratively. The children hadn't been transferred. They'd been silenced, and someone was still out there, making sure the truth stayed buried. March 15th, 2024. Location, Savannah, Georgia. The tape hissed before the voices began. Gavin sat in the darkened study, the windows shut tight against the noise of the outside world. A notepad sat in front of him, though his hand had stopped writing. The cassette player clicked softly as it played the next reel from Meera's collection. Session 7, Naomi T. The girl's voice came in faint at first, then clearer as the recorder adjusted levels. She sounded no older than 8. Nervous, distracted. Naomi, quietly. Do I have to talk about it? Dr. Rowley. Only what you remember, Naomi. No more than that. Naomi. It was dark. I remember that. I didn't like the smell. Dr. Rowley. What smell? Naomi. The room. The carpet. It was sticky, and there was music. Like a toy piano. Dr. Rowley, writing. Where were you when you heard the music? Naomi. In the pink room. Dr. Rowley. Pink walls, like paint. Naomi. No. Wallpaper, with castles. There was a camera on a tall stick. The red light blinked when it was recording. Gavin's fingers clenched into a fist. This wasn't just a psychiatric session. This was evidence. A child remembering a setup, a camera, a blinking red light. Something filmed, something repeated. Dr. Rowley, softly. Was someone else in the room with you? Naomi. The man with the keys. Dr. Rowley. Can you describe him? Naomi. He wore white, but not like you, not like a doctor. His coat was too long and dirty. He always smiled, but not happy smiling, like he knew a joke I didn't. There was a pause on the tape. Papers shifted, then a sound. Gavin sat up straighter. It was faint, but unmistakable. A male voice, low and rumbling, not Meera's. Male voice, distant, unintelligible. Close the door. Naomi, alarmed. That's him. That's his voice. Dr. Rowley, startled. Naomi, we're alone. That wasn't... The tape cut out abruptly. Static, then silence. Gavin stared at the recorder. That voice, whoever it was, hadn't been part of the session. It hadn't been Naomi. It hadn't been Meera. And the panic in Naomi's voice had been real. He rewound it and listened again. The voice was distorted, as if coming from another room or recorded over something else. But it was there. Close the door. It sent a chill down his spine. He looked down at Meera's notepad from the session, kept neatly in the same folder. She had written one sentence beneath Naomi's name. She hears him too. I'm not alone in this. That night, Gavin did something he hadn't done in years. He dreamed of mirrors. He was a child again, barefoot on cold tile, standing in a white hallway that stretched in every direction. At the end of the hall, a door with a black number, 4, and the soft sound of a toy piano playing a broken lullaby. When he reached for the door handle, he caught a glimpse of himself in a mirror that hadn't been there before. Except it wasn't him. Not exactly. The boy in the reflection looked like him, same eyes, same scar on his cheek. But his smile was too wide, too deliberate. His lips moved, though Gavin didn't hear words. He woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat, Mira's notebook still open on his chest. The next day, he took the tapes to Jameson Audio, a local archival restoration shop. He told the tech, a ponytailed guy named Rafe, that the recordings were part of his late mother's academic archive. Rafe looked skeptical. You sure you want these digitized? These aren't just grocery lists, man. I'm sure, Gavin said. Okay, but if anything sounds illegal, you'll let me know, Gavin said quickly. Please, just treat it like evidence. Rafe agreed. Gavin left the tapes and returned to the house. A tension building inside him he couldn't shake. He needed answers faster than the tape machine could give them. He returned to Mira's journal. April 2002. Gabriel K. was never cremated. The funeral home record was forged. The boy buried in that box was not him. I have reason to believe Dr. Vale faked his death. Found new footage mislabeled in the state archives, clearly filmed inside room 4. Same pink walls, same setup Naomi described. Can't be coincidence. He's still filming, or someone is. The furniture is different. The girl is different. But the smile on his face is the same. Then, a line underlined in thick ink. He's still watching. Gavin remembered the mirror. The one he found near the sealed door on the old hospital grounds. Etched into the back. I see you still. He drove back that night, flashlight in hand, and parked beyond the tree line. The sky was overcast. No moon. The trees whispered in a restless wind. Gavin walked to the clearing. The raised slab of concrete looked exactly the same. But something about the air had changed. Colder, more still, like the world held its breath. He crouched and traced the carved 4 with his fingers. Then he noticed something else. Tucked beneath the lip of concrete, nearly hidden by vines, a small metal loop, like the handle of a trap door. He pulled. It didn't budge. But now he knew. It wasn't just a foundation. It was a cover. There was a way in. Back home, his phone buzzed. A message from Rafe at Jameson Audio. Bro, you need to hear tape 9. Call me, like now. Gavin dialed. Rafe answered on the first ring, voice low. Tape 9. You didn't tell me this stuff was real. That's your mom's voice, but she's not talking to a patient. What do you mean? She's arguing with someone. It's mostly one-sided, but toward the end, there's a response. A man says something about room 4 was necessary, then she screams, then the tape cuts out. Could it be Vale? I don't know, but whoever it was, she knew him, she feared him, and she recorded it anyway. Can you send me the file? Already uploading, but Gavin, whatever your mom got into, she wasn't just a doctor, she was a witness. To what? something they didn't want her to remember. March 16th, 2024. Location: Savannah, Georgia. There were 6 names in Mira's notebook. Gavin had copied them down the night before, each listed under the heading Unaccounted Discharge, Wing D. Next to each was a case number, a patient ID, and the same note in Mira's hand. No record of transfer, no record of discharge, no death certificate. The children had vanished, just like Meera. Gavin started his search at the state medical examiner's office downtown. After waiting nearly an hour, he met with a weary forensic archivist named Leona Ellis, who wore a cardigan and thick glasses and looked perpetually 2 coffee cups behind schedule. "I'm trying to find information about 6 children," Gavin told her. "They were all patients at St. Augustine Children's Psychiatric Center around 1987 to 1989. There are no records of them past the closure of the facility." "Names?" she asked, pulling up the archive system. He read them off carefully. Gabriel Keller, Naomi Talbot, Elsie Vega, Sean L. Carver, Dorian Ames, Lee Randall Leona. Typed them in one by one. Only one of them pinged a result. Naomi Talbot. Doe D. April 4th, 1996. Place of death, storage unit, Camden County. Cause, decomposition. Body found in suitcase. Identity confirmed via dental records. Gavin's mouth went dry. "Wait, what?" Leona pulled the file. "Yeah, looks like her remains were found in a long-abandoned unit. Owner had defaulted on payments. They opened it and—" She trailed off. "Well, you don't want to read the autopsy. Poor girl was barely 13. Gavin did read the autopsy. She had surgical scarring, a broken clavicle, a healed ulna fracture, left arm, and inside her stomach were fragments of pink wallpaper. The notes indicated the scene contained a tripod, VHS tapes, and a child-sized vanity covered in glitter and lip gloss. The pink room, Gavin thought. It was real. He asked Leona, "Was anyone ever charged?" She shook her head. Case went cold. They never linked it to anyone. Said the suitcase had no fingerprints, no surveillance footage, no suspect. "What happened to the tapes?" Her eyes narrowed. "Sealed." "Sealed?" "By the state. Case was deemed too sensitive. Judge ordered them archived indefinitely. They're probably buried in an evidence locker somewhere. Can I get access?" "Not without a court order," she said. "Or a badge." Later that afternoon, Gavin sat in Mira's study, pulling boxes from the hallway closet. One of them was labeled, Naomi, Restricted. He pried it open. Inside were 8 photographs, all Polaroids, all grainy, all clearly from inside the same space, the pink room. It was almost like a set. Each image showed a different girl, none of them smiling, all around the same age, between 9 and 12. They were seated on the edge of a child-sized bed with frilly sheets and plush unicorns. Some wore princess dresses, others sat in bathing suits that looked deliberately chosen to appear cute. Gavin felt bile rise in his throat. In the background of one photo was a mirror, and in its reflection, barely visible, was a tall man in a white coat standing off to the side, face blurred, but smiling. He opened another file in the box. It was labeled Patient Video Log, Volume 8, Lee Randall, a transcript. Session. Video notes. Tape. Start. Time code 00:344. Lee enters frame, visibly disoriented. She wears a pink hoodie and pajama pants. Hair is damp. Voice. Off camera. "Lee, look at the mirror. Tell me what you see." Lee, frightened. "I don't want to." Voice. "You need to, or we'll go back to room 4. Lee begins to cry. Voice. "You're a good girl, aren't you?" Lee nods, barely audible. "Yes, doctor." Vale. Gavin slammed the file shut. The name, Dr. Vale. He called Jameson Audio again. Rafe picked up. "Any updates on tape 9? "Man," Rafe said. "I'm only halfway through digitizing them, but that one, it's different. It's not therapy, it's surveillance. Someone left the recorder on during a confrontation." "Between who?" Mira and someone else. Definitely a man. Toward the end, he says something like, "Room 4 was necessary. They were broken anyway." Then Mira yells. Sounds like a scuffle. Then silence. Can you isolate the voice? Clean it up? I'm trying, but it's degraded. This was recorded over something, maybe even intentionally taped over. What do you mean? I think someone tried to erase the original recording. Sloppy job. There are fragments of an older audio beneath it. Child voices, maybe. I'll try to pull them up. Gavin nodded, even though Rafe couldn't see him. Keep going. That night, Gavin visited the Savannah Public Library. There was one name he hadn't looked up directly. Dr. Thurston Vale. He expected nothing, but an archived article from 1993 popped up. Retired psychiatrist survives house fire. Dr. Thurston Vale, 67, formerly of the now-defunct St. Augustine Children's Psychiatric Center, was rescued from his Midway residence after an apparent electrical fire damaged the basement and lower level. No injuries were reported. The doctor declined comment. Neighbors stated he lived alone and rarely left the property. The fire had been ruled accidental. No follow-up. But a property search showed the Midway house was still registered under a shell company tied to Vale. Still standing, still occupied. Gavin stood up, heart hammering. If Vale was alive, if he had never been charged, if he was still here, then Mira's warning wasn't a memory. It was a trail, and someone had to follow it. March 17th, 2024. Location, Savannah, Georgia. The journal was unlike the others. Gavin found it tucked behind the radiator in Mira's bedroom, wedged between old house keys and a brittle legal pad. It wasn't one of her usual black notebooks. This one was smaller, bound in red leather, with a thin strap holding it shut. There was no label, no dates on the cover. But the first page held only a single sentence, written in Mira's hurried, slanted script. If I'm dead, it's because I remembered too much. She had filled the pages by hand. Unlike her formal case notes, these entries were raw, unfiltered, confessional. She hadn't intended anyone to read them, not Gavin, not the board, not even her own therapist. But now they were all that remained of her voice. January 3rd, 2002. I thought the images would fade with time, but they haven't. They've sharpened. I see Naomi's face when I close my eyes. I hear Gabriel's voice when the house settles. I know I should let it go, but I can't. Not until I know what really happened in room 4. January 22nd, 2002. They're lying. The state, the families, the transfer records. I've found death notices for children who were never buried. Empty graves, forged cremation slips. Lee Randall was relocated to a facility in Vermont, but the Vermont registry has no record. She simply vanished, just like the rest. February 5th, 2002. I saw him today. Vale. I was walking past a cafe on Bull Street and caught a reflection in the glass. Him. He's older now, slower. But that limp is the same. The posture, the eyes. He still lives in Midway. Same house. I followed him. He didn't see me. February 28th, 2002. I snuck inside. I know it was illegal. But the side door was unlocked. I couldn't stop myself. The basement is still there. Same layout as the hospital's Wing D. Same floor tiles. Same lighting. He rebuilt it. Room 4 is underneath his house. March 3rd, 2002. He's still recording. There were cameras, mounted, active. I saw a bed with pink sheets. A mirror leaned against the wall. I took photos. I took one of his labeled tapes, volume 962. I didn't watch it. I couldn't. But I have it. And if I disappear, it's proof. March 5th, 2002. He knows. Someone broke into my study. Not a robbery. Nothing stolen. Just moved. Slightly. As if they wanted me to know they'd been there. He's warning me. But I'm not afraid. I've kept everything hidden in the attic. Gavin, if you're reading this. The writing ended mid-sentence. Gavin sat on the edge of Mira's bed, the journal heavy in his hands. He wasn't breathing. She had seen the room. She had been inside the house. And she had stolen one of Vale's tapes. Volume 962. He ran to the closet and threw open every storage box. Shoved aside file folders and cassette reels. It wasn't there. But then, tucked between a pair of winter coats in a dry cleaning bag, he felt it. A VHS tape, unlabeled, wrapped in paper. He unfolded the note Meera had scribbled and stuffed inside the wrapping. If I watch this, I'll never sleep again. But if someone else watches it, maybe they'll finally believe me. There was only one VCR in the house, an old sharp unit still hooked to the small TV in the guest room. Gavin powered it on. The screen flickered with static. He inserted the tape. The image began with color bars, then a timestamp, February 19th, 2002, 9:04 p.m. A room appeared, padded walls, pink curtains, a child-sized mattress in the center, toys scattered, unnaturally arranged. Then a girl entered the frame. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, pale, wearing a floral dress, her face expressionless. A man followed. He wore white scrubs. His face remained just outside the frame. He knelt beside her, speaking low. Gavin turned the volume up. Do you remember the lines we practiced? The girl nodded slowly. Yes, doctor. Vale. She began to speak in a flat, rehearsed tone. Words that sounded more like memorized monologue than conversation. Phrases about obedience, silence, love, touch. Then the camera zoomed slightly, and Vale's hand entered the frame. It moved toward her shoulder. Gavin ejected the tape. His stomach twisted. He ran to the bathroom and vomited. When he returned, he wrapped the tape in 2 layers of plastic and sealed it in a Ziploc bag, then placed it inside the freezer. He didn't want it in the open. He didn't want it in his world. That evening, he returned to Mira's journal. Near the back was an envelope taped to the cover with a label in block letters. For Gavin, only if I'm gone inside, were 3 items. A copy of her medical license, annotated with legal notes. A cassette tape labeled Confession for Gavin. A photo of Gavin at age 5, in a hospital gown, seated on a small padded bench. Behind him, the wall bore the number 4C. Gavin stared at it, cold sweat blooming along his spine. He barely remembered this moment. A vague image, a song in the background, the echo of a hallway and someone humming. He loaded the cassette into the player. Mira's voice filled the room, calm, resolute, tinged with exhaustion. Gavin, if you're listening to this, it means I didn't make it. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to understand why I did what I did. You were one of them. They brought you to St. Augustine under a false diagnosis, said you were experiencing dissociative episodes after your father died. But I knew. I saw the signs. I saw what Vale was doing. And when I saw you, in that room, Gavin, I couldn't breathe. I pulled you from the registry. I altered your files. I wiped the sessions. I erased room 4 from your memory using the very techniques he used on the others. I told myself it was to protect you, but maybe it was cowardice. Maybe I just couldn't bear knowing what he did to my son. I left a part of you in the dark. I'm so sorry, but it's time to remember. Gavin sat in silence. Room 4 wasn't just a mystery he'd stumbled into. It was part of him. The memory wasn't gone, just buried. And now, it was clawing its way back to the surface. March 18th, 2024. Location, Midway, Georgia. The road to Midway was lined with drowned cypress and fog. Gavin hadn't told anyone where he was going. Not Rafe, not Leona, not even the woman at the front desk of the motel where he'd crashed the night before, with Mira's journal clutched like a Bible to his chest. He just drove south, toward the name Meera had written again and again in her notes. Thurston Vale. His GPS directed him off Highway 17 onto a cracked residential loop surrounded by live oaks and decaying mailboxes. At the edge of the cul-de-sac, set back behind overgrown azaleas and an iron gate that leaned left on its hinges, stood a 2-story house with peeling white siding and darkened windows. The kind of house that shouldn't still be standing. The kind that knew how to hide. A faded sign near the front steps read, T. Vale, M.D., Private Practice, Redinsoy, in sun-washed lettering. Gavin parked a block away and approached on foot, camera tucked in his coat pocket and Mira's cassette recorder in hand. The porch groaned under his weight. No lights inside, no security signs. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Doctor? Vale? Nothing. Just as he was about to leave, something in the window moved. A shadow, or a curtain twitch. And then the front door cracked open. A man stood there. Tall, thin, white hair combed straight back, hands pale and veined. His blue eyes were clouded with age, but too sharp to be blind. Yes? He asked. His voice was dry paper. I'm looking for Dr. Vale. I am he, the man said. Gavin blinked. He hadn't expected it to be that easy. My name is Gavin Rowley. Mira Rowley was my mother. Vale's mouth didn't move. Then, slowly, I remember Meera. She disappeared in 2002. I know. That stopped Gavin cold. I need to ask you some questions, he said. Vale studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. 5 minutes, no longer. The house smelled like cedar, camphor, and something older, something metallic. A staircase rose on the left. Photos hung crooked on the wall. Gavin caught glimpses of black and white medical school shots, awards, a long-forgotten certificate from Emory dated 1961. I'm not interested in giving interviews, Vale said, guiding him into a small parlor filled with dust-covered books. I'm not a reporter. Then what are you? Gavin took out a photo, the one from Mira's freezer, the pink room, the girl, the blurred mirror. Vale's smile. Do you deny this is you? Vale stared at the photo for a full 10 seconds. Then, you shouldn't have come here. I found the tapes, Gavin said. I found room 4. I found what you did. And I know. He stopped himself. He didn't want to say it out loud. He didn't want to believe it. Vale's eyes narrowed. You know nothing. Gavin's voice dropped. You took me, didn't you? When I was a child. Silence. Then a whisper. You were just another file, no different from the others. Gavin's blood ran cold. So you admit it? No. Vale rose to his full height. I'm just tired of pretending I forget things. Gavin stood, shaking, and turned to leave. He had what he needed. A voice, a face, a confession. But as he reached the door, Vale spoke again, his tone calm, controlled. Do you want to know why we started room 4? Gavin froze. It wasn't about pleasure, it was about control. The mind is a map, a fragile one. Children, especially, their lines blur easily. You can draw new roads, detours, alternate exits. You tortured them, Gavin said. No, Vale said. We remade them. He stepped closer. Some forgot who they were. Others became who we needed them to be. Gavin pulled open the door. Your mother was a coward, Vale said. Gavin turned. Say her name again. She built her own room 4 after she left the hospital, Vale said. She thought it would save you, but the truth was already inside you. She just didn't want to face it. Gavin's voice cracked. You're going to prison. Then I suggest you hurry, Vale said. I may not live long enough for trial. Gavin left. The door slammed behind him. That night he drove back to Savannah. He called Detective Joseph Morrison, a name Meera had written in her journal as the only cop who listened. He left a voicemail. Detective Morrison, I have something. I think I'm the boy from room 4. I think my mother was murdered by the man who built it. I have tapes, photos, a confession. Then, softer, I think I need help. The next morning, his phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number, audio file attached. Subject, Room 4, recovery track. He opened it. It was his mother's voice, recorded in her calm, therapeutic cadence. Gavin, if you're listening to this track, it means I've begun restoring the pieces. You may experience nausea, disorientation, blurred memory. That's normal. You were inside room 4. You were made to forget. But we're going to remember together. I'm here. I won't leave you. Not this time. Then came music. Software metallic. A child's piano. The lullaby. The one from his dream. And then a second voice. Small, high-pitched. His own. Mommy? Can I come out now? March 19th, 2024. Location, Savannah, Georgia. The mirror was small, no more than a hand mirror. Gavin had found it at the bottom of a box labeled Session Tools, Sensory Recall. Most of the items inside were ordinary. A stress ball, a metronome, a bottle of lavender oil. But the mirror was different. On the back, written in his mother's unmistakable script, used with Gavin, July 1990, test failed, memory fracture worsened, do not repeat. He stared at his reflection. He looked tired, pale, dark shadows beneath his eyes. But behind the surface, something shimmered, a distortion he couldn't name. He raised the mirror to eye level. For a moment, he thought he saw someone else. Not a ghost, not a stranger, but himself, aged down. A boy in a hospital gown, wide-eyed, silent. Then the image snapped back. He was alone in the room again. The next day, Gavin returned to Jameson Audio. Rafe was waiting behind the counter, headphones still clamped over one ear. I cleaned it up, Rafe said, holding up a thumb drive. Tape 9. You got the voice? Better than that, Rafe said, lowering his voice. There's video. Gavin blinked. What? Your mom was recording, not just audio. The last 5 tapes, she was filming herself. The audio we heard? It's from the night she confronted Vale, the same night she disappeared. They watched it together in the back room. The screen flickered to life. Meera sat on a couch in her study. Night outside the window. A clock on the mantel read 9:17 p.m. Thurston, you don't get to rewrite this, she said. You don't get to erase them all. Off camera, a male voice answered, I erased what needed erasing. You took my son. I gave him back. The camera jolted slightly, as if someone bumped it. Meera stood, pacing. You broke him. Silence. He wasn't the first, Vale replied. You knew what we were doing. You approved the sedation schedules. You read the files. Don't you dare. You only turned against me when he became one of them. The video shifted. Meera rushed forward, grabbing the camera. The frame cut off. The screen went black. Rafe paused it. That's it. Last image. Gavin sat frozen. My mom was part of it? Rafe didn't answer. He didn't need to. Back at Meera's house, Gavin found a drawer in her old desk labeled 1990 internal. Inside were emails, memos, typed reports, mostly redacted, but the meaning was clear. Meera had worked with Vale for nearly a year. After Gavin's father died, she'd taken a sabbatical, and during that time she joined the behavioral regression study program inside St. Augustine. Room 4 wasn't just a cell, it was a lab, and she had helped design it. They said we were treating trauma, Meera had written in a memo, that these children were too broken to function. That regression could help them reformat, start over. I believed it, until they brought in the cameras. In her journal, another entry stood out. I was a mother by day and a technician by night, watching others' children scream while mine slept down the hall. But the worst moment? was realizing I didn't know when he stopped being mine. When I let him go. When I let Vale take him. Gavin sat alone on the floor. His childhood wasn't just lost. It had been engineered. Manufactured memories, fabricated diagnoses, false stories about why he bit the neighbor's dog, why he wouldn't speak for months, why he hated mirrors. The trauma wasn't random. It was installed. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Rowley," a voice said. "This is Detective Morrison. I got your message." Gavin exhaled. "I found him." "Vale?" "Yes." There was a pause. "You need to meet me," Morrison said. "We need to talk, face to face, not over the phone." "When?" "Now. I'm already on my way to you." 10 minutes later, Morrison stood on Gavin's porch, trench coat flecked with rain. He was older than Gavin expected, late 50s, maybe 60s, but sharp-eyed. His badge was visible, his voice steady. "Before we do anything official," Morrison said, "I need you to answer something honestly." "Okay." "Do you remember being in room 4? Gavin hesitated. "I remember mirrors, a piano, pink walls, and a man whose smile didn't change." Morrison nodded slowly. "Then I believe you." He pulled out a folder and handed it over. Inside were crime scene photos. Not from the hospital, not from the pink room. From a recent raid. A 2-story home in rural Georgia. The basement had been converted into a near-identical replica of room 4. A girl had been rescued. Age 11. Condition stable. She was drawing pictures of a man she called the Mira Doctor. "I'm sorry," Morrison said, "but you weren't the last." Gavin felt the floor shift beneath him. He had thought this was history, a sealed vault, but it was still happening. Somewhere. To someone else. "Do you have the evidence?" Morrison asked. Gavin nodded. He retrieved the thumb drive, the cassette tapes, Mira's journal, and the photos. Morrison's expression darkened as he examined each one. "This is enough to bury him," he said. "And the others?" "What others?" Morrison looked up. "You think Vale built this alone?" March 20th, 2024. Location: Savannah and Midway, Georgia. The first thing Gavin noticed was the humidity. Even with the dehumidifiers roaring in the hallway, the basement air inside the Midway house clung to his skin. Faint odors drifted up: bleach, old wood, dust, and something metallic beneath it all. Detective Morrison walked ahead of him, flashlight beam cutting across cement and dust. "You sure you're up for this?" he asked over his shoulder. "I need to see it," Gavin said. "All right," Morrison said. "Just be prepared. It's a space built for conditioning, not healing." The door at the bottom of the stairs was locked, triple bolted, reinforced from the inside. Morrison produced the key. "We found it in Vale's coat pocket." The first lock turned, then the second, then a final heavy thunk as the door released. They stepped inside, and Gavin's breath caught in his throat. Room 4 was real. It was identical to what he'd seen on the tapes. Walls padded with pink foam panels, softened just enough to hide the underlying restraints. A low twin bed with cartoon princess sheets, positioned in the center of the room like a stage. A full-length mirror mounted on one side, ringed with small LED lights. A child's vanity set, untouched, stocked with glitter lip balm, brushes, and plastic jewelry. But it wasn't just a room. It was a replica, a reproduction, a preserved environment, staged like a museum for pain. On the far side, Morrison pointed to a closet door. "We found her in there. The girl." Gavin didn't speak. He couldn't. "Over here," Morrison said quietly. They stepped into the back corridor, behind a hidden partition. There, along the cement wall, were 4 surveillance monitors, all wired into a recording deck with timestamp overlays. Each monitor showed a different angle of the room. Each had labeled switches. Cam 1, mirror. Cam 2, bed. Cam 3, entrance. Cam 4, upper corner. Morrison flipped through the archive. The footage was date-stamped for March 12th, less than a week ago. A girl, no older than 10, sat on the bed, silent, her hands folded neatly. She looked at the mirror. She spoke to it. "Daddy says don't blink when the light is on." Gavin turned away. On a nearby table, a stack of DVDs sat neatly bound in paper sleeves. Session 1042, Ava M. Session 1120, Layla R. Session 1183, Child 009, unlabeled. Every sleeve marked with a 4-digit code and the initials TV, written in tight, obsessive loops. "We're going to need a team to catalog everything," Morrison said grimly. "Homeland Security's already been looped in. FBI will be crawling this place by tomorrow." "Do you think this was the only site?" Gavin asked. Morrison shook his head. "Vale worked with others. We're pulling names from Mira's notes, matching patient records to missing children cases. But we think the network was bigger than just him." At the far end of the basement, they found a sealed cabinet. Morrison pried it open with a crowbar. Inside were rows of binders, neatly labeled by year, by patient. One had Gavin's name. He took it out, hands trembling. Inside were photographs. Polaroids of him, age 5, sitting cross-legged on a mattress, eyes vacant, a paper crown on his head. In one photo, a mirror captured a blurred adult standing behind him. The label beneath read, "Subject, G. Rowley, positive compliance. Mirror conditioning, week 3. He turned to the final page, a printed report. G. Rowley displays high susceptibility to dissociative suggestion. Patient responds positively to mirror identification tests. Fear responses triggered by proximity to glass and auditory stimulation. Music box, toy piano. Recommend further testing under increased sedation." At the bottom, signed, Dr. T. Vale. Gavin dropped the binder and backed away. Morrison steadied him. "I didn't imagine it," Gavin said. "No," Morrison said quietly. "You lived it." Back upstairs, they entered Vale's personal office. It was clean, orderly, the kind of room you'd expect from an aging retiree. Books on psychiatry and philosophy, framed diplomas, a chessboard mid-game. But inside a desk drawer, Gavin found something else. A thick, leather-bound notebook, Vale's own journal. He opened to the first page. The perfect blank page is a child. And beneath that, "They come broken. We fix them. We make them forget. And in forgetting, they become whatever we need." Morrison took it carefully, placed it in an evidence bag. "We'll need forensics to go through this. But if half of what's in Mira's recordings is corroborated here, Vale won't die a free man." "He said he wouldn't make it to trial," Gavin said. "He said he was already dying." Morrison nodded grimly. "Then we better move fast." That night, Gavin returned to Mira's house with a new weight pressing against his chest. He sat at the kitchen table and unsealed one of the last recordings his mother had left. Her voice emerged through the static, this time calm. Still clinical, but laced with something else. Sorrow. "Gavin, there will come a moment where you remember everything. I don't know when it will happen. I don't even know if it'll be safe when it does. But I believe in you, and I need you to believe that I tried. I tried to protect you. I failed in the beginning, but I didn't stop fighting. Not until the end." He rested his head in his hands, eyes stinging. The memory fragments were already beginning to merge, like pages from 2 books being pressed together. He saw himself staring into the mirror. He saw a door with the number 4C. He saw Vale's face, clear now, bending toward him and whispering, "Don't blink when the light is on." March 21st, 2024. Location, Savannah, Georgia. The doorbell rang at 3:46 a.m. Gavin was already awake, hunched over Mira's final notebook at the kitchen table. His eyes glazed from too many hours and too little sleep. He froze. Another knock, firmer this time. Then a voice. "Mr. Rowley, it's Detective Morrison." He opened the door. Morrison stood on the porch, coat soaked from the rain, expression tight. "We have a problem," he said. Inside, Morrison laid out a folder. Inside were photos, security camera stills, surveillance logs, time-stamped GPS pings. Every image showed Gavin, outside Mira's house, leaving Jameson audio, even stepping off a bus in Midway. "These were sent to me anonymously," Morrison said. "No name, no sender, but they're from the past few days. Someone's been following me. Watching you," Morrison said. "Tracking every move you make." Gavin's mouth went dry. "Vale?" "We believe so," Morrison said. But he wasn't working alone. Whoever took these had clearance, knew your routine, and knew exactly what not to show. "Notice what's missing?" Gavin looked. None of the photos showed Vale's house, or the basement, or the night Gavin confronted him. "It's selective surveillance," Morrison said. "Someone's protecting him." Later that morning, Gavin went back to Jameson audio with the photos. Rafe's hands trembled as he flipped through them. "You think he tapped us?" he asked. "I think we were already inside the system," Gavin said. Rafe pulled out a hard drive. "Then you'll want this. I pulled everything, not just from the tapes, but from the original reels Meera left in her attic. Some were blank, some were noise, but one." He handed over a USB stick. "Play track 42. Back home, Gavin loaded it onto his laptop. The file opened with static. Then Mira's voice, but not her usual clinical tone. This was quieter, more vulnerable. "There's someone else. I don't know who. He wears a white coat, but I've never seen him on staff lists, never at faculty meetings. The patients call him the Quiet Man, sometimes just Dr. Q. He doesn't speak on camera, he doesn't appear in the files, but the children draw him again and again. Tall, no face, always near the mirror. I think he's still active. I think he's the one watching me now." Gavin sat back, heart pounding. Dr. Q. The Quiet Man. Not Vale. Someone else, still out there. He remembered the drawings from the Midway basement, the ones taped to the closet wall. A tall figure, a mirrored face, hands too long, standing just out of frame. He called Morrison. "Who's Dr. Q? Where did you hear that name?" "Meera recorded it," Gavin said. "She thought he wasn't real, but now I'm not sure." There was silence on the line. Then Morrison said, "Come to the station." Now. The precinct was quieter than usual. Morrison brought Gavin straight to a back room. He shut the door, pulled down a screen, projected a case file onto it. A government file, redacted in heavy black ink, labeled Project Reflect, Internal Investigation, Do Not Duplicate. This program operated out of a shadow division of the National Behavioral Health Agency, Morrison said. Late 80s into the early 2000s. St. Augustine was one of 4 pilot institutions. Vale ran the face of it, but the internal lead was someone else. He clicked the next slide. A photo, grainy, poor resolution. A man in a lab coat turned sideways, walking past a glass observation window. No name, just a tag pinned to his coat. Q. "We never got his full identity," Morrison said. "But Meera was right. The Quiet Man existed, and we believe he's still alive, still protecting the remnants of the project, maybe even Vale." Gavin felt his stomach twist. Why wasn't this in her files? "It was," Morrison said. "Just buried." He handed Gavin a printed document. Mira's handwriting filled the margins. "Q isn't a person. Q is a role, a position. It changes, like a mask." Back home, Gavin poured through the last of Mira's recordings. At the bottom of her 4-Gavin box was one final tape, labeled in red ink. Track 00, Do Not Listen. He stared at it for a long time, then pressed play. "They won't stop," Mira's voice whispered. "Even if I'm gone, even if you burn the files, Room 4 was only the beginning. They were testing compliance. Now they're testing continuity. And if they're watching you, it means you passed. They let you leave. You're the control variable, Gavin. You always were." Static. Then a new voice. Male. Calm. Too smooth. "Hello, Gavin. Welcome back. You were always meant to return." March 22nd, 2024. Location: Savannah, Georgia. Washington, D.C. They called it Project Reflect, a government-funded psychological experiment launched in 1986 under the guise of pediatric trauma therapy. It began as a partnership between psychiatric hospitals, state-run orphanages, and a now-defunct division of the National Behavioral Health Agency. Gavin read the documents Morrison gave him, his fingers shaking as he turned each page. Phase 1, induced memory fracture. Phase 2, mirror identification conditioning. Phase 3, controlled narrative implantation. Each child was given a different story, a different version of their reality. They were shown mirrors daily, asked to describe the face in the glass, name it, and believe it was not their own. A method for rewriting identity, a technique designed not just to erase trauma, but to replace the subject entirely. Meera had known, and she had participated, but somewhere along the way, she had turned. She began copying files, altering schedules, pulling select children from rotation, including her son. She had seen too much, and someone made sure she disappeared before she could reveal the rest. Gavin boarded a plane to Washington, D.C. that night, escorted by Morrison and 2 federal agents. The basement in Midway had become a federal crime scene, but the quiet man hadn't been found. Yet. They arrived at a government archive center near DuPont Circle. Inside, 3 floors of locked documents and sealed evidence, much of it unseen since 2003. A woman in a gray suit met them at the door. "You're the Rowley boy," she said softly. "We've been waiting." Gavin didn't know what that meant, but he followed her down 2 levels into a restricted vault. Room 6G. Inside was a single file folder labeled in red. Case Control. G. Rowley /1989 to 1992 /Category Q Subject. He opened it slowly. Inside, a photo of himself at age 6, sitting cross-legged on the floor, eyes glazed, a plastic crown on his head. A report from Dr. Vale. Subject exhibits extreme narrative compliance. Strong candidate for longitudinal observation. Do not release without Q clearance. And a psychological summary marked Top Secret. Q handler, access only. Subject's exposure to mirror conditioning yielded near total compliance with implanted false identity narrative. Memory realignment successful. Subject displays fabricated grief response when prompted with simulated paternal loss. Real paternal death has been masked. Future observation required. Gavin dropped the file. "Simulated paternal loss?" he whispered. "What does that mean?" Morrison picked up the report. "You thought your father died of a heart attack, right?" Gavin nodded. "That's what Meera told me." Morrison pointed to a footnote. Biological father extracted from program. Subject informed of fabricated death event at age 4. False obituary planted in local paper. Subject's grief monitored and recorded. Tapes 212 to 220. Gavin's chest tightened. "He didn't die?" "Looks like he tried to expose the project," Morrison said grimly. "They made him disappear." A wall inside Gavin's mind buckled. Every memory he had of his childhood, his grief, his loneliness, his fear of reflections, was a script. Installed, performed, recorded. He had spent his whole life mourning a death that never happened. They took him into a side room. There, behind glass, sat a man in his late 60s. His wrists were cuffed, his eyes were shut. The quiet man. Not Vale, not a monster, just quiet. But Gavin recognized him, not from memory, but from dreams, from nightmares, from a tall figure in a white coat who stood in the mirror when he was too afraid to look at himself. "This is him," Morrison said. "The man who oversaw your sessions." The original Dr. Q. Gavin stepped forward. The man opened his eyes. They were pale gray, dead calm. "You've grown," he said softly. "You know who I am?" The man tilted his head. "You were always my favorite." Gavin's jaw clenched. "I know what you did." "No," Q said. "You only know what we let you remember." Morrison cut in. "He's not answering questions without legal counsel." "That's fine," Q replied. "Gavin already knows everything. He just hasn't let it surface yet." He smiled, then whispered, "She didn't save you, Gavin. She rewrote you. And now, you're the proof that it worked." Later, in the hallway, Morrison looked shaken. "They're going to bury this," he said. "This whole operation. Too many agencies were involved, too many children. If this gets out—" "We don't let them bury it," Gavin said. "We go public. You'll have to show them the tapes, your face, your name." "I don't care." He pulled out Mira's journal. "She gave me the truth. I'm not hiding from it." That night, Gavin uploaded the files, photos, tapes, documents, to a secure archive, and contacted a reporter his mother once trusted, Alyssa Whitaker, the same woman Meera had written about in 2002 before she vanished. "If anyone can expose them, it's her," Meera had written. "She lost a sister to reflect. She's not afraid of mirrors anymore." As he sent the final file, Gavin paused at one last document, buried in the tape metadata. A memo from 1992, signed only with the letter Q. "If subject G completes all stages, including memory fracture recovery and identity reassociation, release him into civilian narrative. No further sessions required. Let him live as proof the mirror method works. Control must forget it is controlled." Gavin stared at the screen, then whispered to himself, "I remember." March 23rd, 2024. Location, Savannah, Georgia. National Press Syndicate, Washington, D.C. The camera light blinked red. Gavin stared at the lens, sitting alone in a quiet room inside the National Press Syndicate, a folded copy of Mira's journal on the table beside him. Across from him sat journalist Alyssa Whitaker, expression unreadable. "Are you ready?" she asked. Gavin nodded. Then, "My name is Gavin Rowley. I was part of an unauthorized federal conditioning program between 1989 and 1992 called Project Reflect. I was 4 years old when it started. I didn't know my life wasn't real until a month ago." For the next hour, he told everything. The tapes in Mira's freezer, the mirror room in Midway, the confessions on cassette, the reappearance of the quiet man, the lie about his father's death, the falsified memories, the pink walls, the piano, and most of all, Room 4. Across the country, survivors watched in silence. In Idaho, a woman turned off the lights and wept, recognizing the same mirror she had once been forced to smile into. In Florida, a man smashed his bathroom vanity with a wrench after hearing Mira's voice again. In Maine, a child psychiatrist quietly packed away her diplomas, unable to forget what she once authorized under a different name. And in D.C., 3 senators issued a joint statement denying any knowledge of the so-called Reflect Protocol. 1 week later, Morrison called. "You did it," he said. "They're reopening the archives?" "They're not just reopening them," Morrison said. "They're indicting Vale and Q and at least 4 former agency execs from the NBHA." He paused. "And Gavin, we found your father. His name was Dr. Michael Rowley, a trauma specialist. He'd tried to blow the whistle in 1991, was marked unstable, discredited, and allegedly committed suicide. Except he hadn't. He'd been living under an assumed identity in Alaska, quiet, alone, off the grid, waiting for the truth to catch up. The reunion wasn't cinematic. It was awkward, hesitant. But when Gavin saw him, really saw him, gray hair, same eyes, hands trembling, they both cried. Not because they remembered, but because they both had forgotten. Because someone else had written their grief for them. Back in Savannah, Gavin stood at the mirror in Mira's old hallway. He'd taken down the paper she used to cover it. Now he looked straight into it. His own eyes stared back. No flicker, no distortion, no child in the glass, no quiet man in the corner. Just him. He reached for the last tape, the one still inside the recorder when Meera disappeared. He pressed play. If you're hearing this, Gavin, then you've come further than I ever dared hope. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it all. I'm sorry I helped build it. But I never stopped trying to bring you back. You were never broken. You were just overwritten. And now you get to write yourself again. I love you. I remember you. And I hope someday you'll remember me too. The tape clicked, then kept spinning, a hum, a whir, then silence. And still, it spun. Because some tapes weren't made to end. Some were meant to keep running, until someone was finally ready to press record. April 6th, 2024 location. Somewhere quiet. It had been 2 weeks since the broadcast. In that time, the world had shifted. Project Reflect trended globally for 3 days. 4 former officials were arrested. 6 others vanished. The Midway house was burned to the ground under suspicious circumstances. A dozen survivors came forward. None of them remembered Gavin. But they all remembered the mirror. Gavin didn't return to work. Didn't return to Mira's house either. He rented a small cabin 2 hours outside of Savannah, surrounded by pine and quiet. He left his phone off. He brought only a notebook, a box of tapes, and 1 framed photograph. A Polaroid of him and Meera, blurry, taken in 1995 at a roadside diner. He had no memory of that day, but she had written on the back, "Your real smile came back here." In the mornings, Gavin sat by the window and wrote. Not reports, not statements, just memories. What he could recall, what he might have imagined, what felt real. A white hallway, the sound of water dripping, a toy piano behind a locked door, a man with gloves whispering, "Start again." Mira's voice on the other side of glass saying, "That's my son." One night he set up a tape recorder and sat in front of it. He hit record. "My name is Gavin Rowley. I was made to forget my life. I was raised inside a lie. But I'm not a subject anymore. I'm not a variable. I'm not a product. I'm someone's son." He paused. Then, "And I remember her now." He let the tape roll for an hour. He said nothing more. Just the sound of rain against the window, the wind through pine, breath, proof that he was still here. On April 6th, he received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single item, a photograph. It was a still from a security feed, black and white. Time-stamped June 1991. It showed room 4, but empty. Except for one thing, a boy standing in the mirror, not reflected, inside it, wearing a crown, looking back. Gavin turned it over. 1 line was written in blue ink. The last version never left. He stared at it for a long time, then burned it in the fireplace. As the cabin dimmed, he sat down again at the mirror. Not to test it, not to fear it, not to remember, just to see his own eyes, clear, present, real. Behind him, the last tape continued to spin. No voices, no conditioning, no commands, only silence. And then, a new sound. Laughter, his own, unscripted, unrehearsed, unbroken.